Good evening, dear listeners, but don't open up your eyes just yet. Tonight we're digging into that old school religion, and with it, genealogy, because sometimes even eldritch voices might produce a little whisper. Now we're gonna start off easy. The idea, sky enough speak as one, and the daemon of the concept of disowning. See the grudge, the sister, or the daughter of in her teeth. But these are gods, so why not both, right? In her teeth's husband, Laugh Last, our favoriteest god of all here at the Dreaming Prophet and chronic cosplayer. Are you keeping up? We're gonna move on. Laugh Last's latest waifu, see the... No, that's getting weird. Let's just say he's our end mother's ex-husband, and we'll just slide a new waifu into that slot. Who here seems the most matrimonial of our daemons? Dogs are loyal, so let's just slip a toothy ring right on Hunt the Strong's neck.
If we slip the ring around his neck, I'm going to start tightening it.
Ooh, my name is Lavanya.
I'm Astro.
And I'm xaviul.
This is a Blackout Club show for Blackout Club players with minimal speculation, all lore, and a focus on the known facts. Our topic of the day is a discussion on mythology.
So that leads us into our spoiler and content warnings. As always, the Dreaming Prophet is not spoiler-free. We will spoil you, but thankfully, sometimes, for the most part, you will get some warnings. Our content warnings for tonight are death, suicide, and a whole fuck ton of nerd shit. And of course, religion. We will be discussing a number of different religious beliefs and, to some extent, religious practices throughout this episode. As always, when it comes to discussions of real-world religions, make sure that you use this information respectfully and in a context that acknowledges the fact, even though some of this may be referred to as mythology, a great deal of this is still actively used in worship. These are largely discussing living religions, and they should be treated with the cultural sensitivity that dictates.
Also, this intro has been recorded separate from the episode itself, so the audio will sound different. Thank you for your understanding. And for the second part of our episode, we have another guest with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there, I'm Burrick. I'm on the Discord and Steam as Burrick, and you might recognize me from such topics as how can I make this topic about Ireland, and why aren't you playing Thief right now? For the purpose of this podcast, I'm a resident Irish myth enthusiast. Fun fact, my name Burrick comes from the Thief games, and it's a tunneling lizard monster. I think they're adorable.
So tonight, for the second part of our episode, we are covering mythology, that fascinating exploration and deep dive into the human consciousness. Now, the Blackout Club is set in the real world, air quotes included, and that means that it exists within the context of our religious environments out in this meat space that our flesh suits occupy. Religion is rarely addressed explicitly in the game. This is 100% on purpose.
Noel said, in response to whether or not there were churches in Redacre, yes, but, quote, we wouldn't put it in the game because people project known world religions on these darker concepts we're proposing that live beneath the masks of this or that cultural god, and it just makes them intellectually lazy, end quote.
Little did he know that this episode was coming.
With that said, there's a lot of comparisons and parallels drawn throughout the game to various religions, and they're interesting to contemplate in light of the characters. So we're gonna dig into it anyway. Or else you could say...
Knock, knock.
Get the door.
It's religion.
Dance and song are largely believed in academia to be a byproduct of the human ability for mimicry, which you can see an example of our mimicry compulsion when you meow back at your cat. Music as a construct may have been born out of the natural sounds produced by nature, and by the pattern of impact from the creation of stone tools. But rhythm appears to be hardwired into humanity. It is linked into pattern recognition, and music is universally structured around rhythmic universals, in the same way that language is governed by universal constants such as Zipf's law.
Dance is largely governed by rhythm and is believed to be, per an article in Science, a byproduct of a link between the auditory and motor parts of the brain. Most animals are incapable of following a beat or moving synchronously with other animals in a coordinated fashion to the rhythm of it. The ones that are capable of it, chimpanzees, parrots, elephants as a few, are ones that are generally linked to higher cognitive abilities.
Ritual dance and song are a major part of many world religions. Dance is not typically a prevalent part of Abrahamic religions in Euro-American spheres, although it was historically. For instance, David danced before the Lord, but song is often featured. Many Christian denominations have a focus on choir as religious involvement, and some liturgical rites involve song or call and response style rhythmic interplay.
Ritual or sacred dance is featured heavily in many different cultures. It's one of those few universal constants that we have. Wherever we have humans, we have people dancing, however poorly, however off-key. Here's a couple of examples of different ones. We're only listing off 6 or so because this is not a dance podcast. So here are some examples. First of all is that in ancient Greece, they had the Maenads ecstatic dance, where worshippers of Dionysus danced to the point of collapsing. They were overcome with the frenzy of emotion and the frenzy of movement, and sometimes they'd rip people apart physically with their bare hands and teeth, as one does. Another example can be found in the Palo Volador, which can be found throughout Mesoamerica. It's a ritual dance in which 5 participants would climb up a 30-foot pole high up in the air, and 4 of them would jump off the sides of it. Thankfully, they were attached by ropes. This was not a ritual suicide. This is still a dance. One would stay on top of it, dancing and playing instruments, and this one presumably also had a rope, but maybe not. Our third example is the Bari's dances, which began as a ritual dance in Bali, but can feature weapons and serves as one of our modern examples of a war dance. So that's pretty neat. And the last one is the Odyssey in Hinduism, the name of which I'm undoubtedly mangling. This is part of a large family of ritual dances that can be found throughout India and throughout Hinduism in general, because ritual dance is pretty much one of the most common forms of ritual and worship throughout human cultures. People just love to dance.
Song and dance are mentioned frequently throughout the Blackout Club. The most obvious example of this is in Dance for Us, who wants players to play music for her, to sing for her, to dance for her.
But the idea frequently notes that the demons started off as music, and music is one of the core themes of the Blackout Club, which can be seen through every aspect of it. The instrument exists underneath the town of Redacre, playing a constant mind control song, one of many.
Other examples of these are the headphones in the Canceller mission, which disrupts the song, the Dance Party mission, which plays a song that disrupts speakers ones, and the Singing Stone, which plays a constant song when carried that brainwashes our parents.
That's my favorite mission, Screaming Head.
You're too powerful.
It just sounds so beautiful as it screams and screams.
And of course, the Old Tongue, from which demons sprung and human sentience appears linked to in some unusual fashion. It was the early precursor of both music and dance in humanity.
So our first real-world example of the daemons being linked to things in real mythology is In Her Teeth and Santa Muerte. Santa Muerte is a deity and saint of Mexican and Mexican-American religious groups. She is also known as Our Lady of Holy Death.
This link was puzzled out by the players largely based on In Her Teeth's domains and attitudes. She's usually depicted as a skeletal figure draped in bright colors and flowers, and she's usually holding objects. Sometimes that can be a scythe. Watch out.
Besides death, she has dominion over healing, protection, and financial prosperity. She's also associated with safe passage, both from life to death as well as throughout life. She is said to protect people from violent deaths.
Santa Muerte is associated with a lot of different domains, and we don't have time to properly encapsulate her whole history, but it is cool to mention. If you're interested in learning more, take some time to read up about her.
And remember, as with many of the things that we'll mention throughout this podcast, a lot of these figures that we are mentioning are from active, live religions. These are not necessarily fictional characters, so make sure that when you're examining them and reading up on them and everything else, you keep in mind these have a high amount of importance to many of the people who worship them.
So be respectful.
Good rule of thumb. Our second real-world analogy is In Her Teeth and Izanami. Izanami is the Shinto goddess of creation and death. This association is specifically mentioned in-game by In Her Teeth.
In a dream, she alludes to the idea that the demons may have been mirrored worldwide and may not simply exist in Redacre. This builds out the world outside the town, even though we as players will probably never see that world.
Although In Her Teeth hasn't mentioned Izanami by name, we know she mentioned specifically that she has a following in Japan. Izanami is just our best guess, but there may be other possibilities.
Izanami was among some of the first deities to appear in the world, and she had many children who grew up to be notable in their own right. She and her partner are also credited with creating the first island out of the ocean. After she died, her husband tried to find her in the underworld. It went poorly. He ran from her in fear, and she stayed behind.
This could be argued as an interesting parallel for Laplace and In Her Teeth, or not, because really, has Laplace ever created anything in his life?
Next up is Chase the Sun and Nike. Nike is the Greek goddess of strength, speed, and victory. The shoe company's named after her.
This relation was mentioned by Null as an offhand joke in the Discord. One of many. Is quite a joker, that Null fellow. The chat was talking about the Hunter's motto, quote, "Just do it. Aw, he even took my Nike sponsorship. And I actually was Nike," end quote.
Greek mythology is interesting in that it is an oral tradition that was written down over time. So depending on the areas and the city-states and the time period, legends varied heavily. And that means, depending on the version of the myth that you prefer, Nike had 2 possible lineages and many more in different areas. We're only covering the 2 though. In one myth, she was the daughter of Ares, the god of war. Makes a certain amount of sense. You always want victory there, right? And in another, she was born to the Titans, which were representations of primordial forces, in concepts more so than the Olympians themselves, who would encompass entire domains. Her siblings, in that version of the myth, were Titans who had domains like strength and force. Either way, her competitive streak is pretty clear in every version of it. Victory is not only about winning, it's about grinding your opponent's face into the dust and supping on their tears.
She was a divine charioteer and flew around battlefields, awarding glory and fame. She's associated with the crown of laurels for this reason.
Next up is Seed the Grudge and Nemesis. Nemesis was the Greek goddess of retribution. Null alluded to her connection, calling Seed the Grudge Nemesis-like.
Nemesis was the original Avenger, back before it was cool and mainstream. She punished people, but she is specifically mentioned as punishing those who display hubris, excessive pride and self-confidence, or arrogance before the gods.
Arrogance before the gods was a big theme throughout Greek mythology, and interestingly enough, also one that will get you called out by various daemons in the game itself. Early Greek religion held that an abundance of happiness was unhealthy for humanity. Humanity was supposed to suffer, and part of the gods' role was to ensure that they continuously felt some level of despair. This is an interesting thing to consider when our name for the voices is literally daemons, a term that comes from ancient Greece that refers to the paranatural characters that existed within their mythology, characters such as the gods. There's an interesting book called Greek Religions by Walter Burrick. It directly defines this term as, quote, "Daemon is a cult power, a force that drives man forward to where no agent can be named. The individual feels as if it were that the tide is with him. He acts with the daemon, sim daimoni. Or else, when everything else turns against him, he stands against the daemon, pros daemona."
Our next association is the measure cuts and Brigid. Brigid is the Celtic goddess with dominion over smithing, medicine, and art, among many other things. This link is mentioned by the measure cuts in passing, who, speaking of gender in the daemons, mentions he was once she and a forge goddess. Brigid is not mentioned by name, this is just our best guess.
Brigid is known as a threefold goddess. At her core, she's associated heavily with fire, and that fire branches into her various domains. The fires of the forge to make tools and weapons, the fires of the hearth to care for others with remedies, the fires of inspiration to facilitate art.
She is specifically associated with the highest version of those things. If your tools are the most excellently forged tools, if your poetry is the finest and most thoughtful poetry, then Bridget might have some interest. Might. There's no guarantees. There is no legal contract. Sadly, because she also seems associated with intelligence and wisdom. So maybe if you write up a legal contract, you take her to court, and you get it notarized so it's binding, maybe then she will take interest.
That seems pretty in character with the measure cuts.
It tracks, it tracks.
Speak as One failed in winning him back because Speak as One should have taken him to court, but they just disregarded all of my advice. We want him to love us for who we are. That isn't how you win the measure cuts.
Should have written him some poetry, Speak as One. Next up is Theodair in Prometheus. Prometheus was a titan and folk hero of Greek mythology. The Titans were a separate class of beings than the Olympians and the gods. After the war in which Zeus and the Olympians seized control of the world, they were bound and banished to Tartarus.
Prometheus is associated with two things. First, setting the precedent of sacrifice to the gods. He tricked Zeus, ensuring that humanity sacrificed bones and fat to the gods instead of flesh.
The second thing that Prometheus is known for is stealing fire from man, for which he was chained to a rock forever to have his liver pecked by an eagle, and for which man was burdened with mischief, sorrow, diseases, hope, and women? Because it turns out that classical Greece was pretty sexist. Who could have known? An important thing to keep in mind while you're going through these myths, if you decide to research independently, a lot of societies had significantly different social norms that we may find repugnant or just pretty fucked up today. Different times, different places, significantly different cultures. Expect a little culture clash.
But each one of them terrible in their own specific way.
Humanity may have our differences, but the true universal constant is that we'll always find something to be assholes about.
There's a few parallels between Theodair and Prometheus. Theodair gave humanity stolen fire in terms of our free will and freed minds. The actual worth of this is argued between him and Speak as One, and whether this was a boon or a burden. Historically speaking, Theodair has been punished pretty hard for this, as seen by the hunting him down and murdering every trace of him.
So could you say that Theodair gave humanity fire and in return Speak as One gave us laugh last? Since man was burdened with mischief and sorrow.
An appropriate punishment. Humanity can have a little bit of free will, as a treat.
It's also worth noting that this isn't the only stolen fire parallel in the game. In an interview with the podcast Everybody's Talking at Once, Noel once mentioned that the kids using Chorus brand phones is intentional. By using their own tech against them, we are also, in a way, stealing our own fire from them.
But Theodair isn't the only one associated with Greek mythology. It turns out, just like Theodair stole his identity, his personhood, and his very ability to exist from Speak as One, he might have stolen some of his themes too. What an asshole.
Theater in ancient Greece could be seen as a form of worship. Tragedies, comedies, and even satyr plays frequently explained and justified the rules of society, the structure of their religion, and the laws through which they understood life. Greek theater may have initially come from the worship of the theater god aspect of Dionysus and the song ritual called tragodia, a ritual in which they sacrificed goats, wore masks, and engaged in music and dance. It also may have come from the dithyrambs, the choral song and dance performed in honor of the wine aspect of Dionysus.
Now, the dithyrambs are different from the kissy rams. Do not kiss a goat on the nose, no matter how adorable they may be. You know exactly where it's been, and that's nowhere good. Another alternative explanation for the start of theater is Thespis. He is the individual that is credited with creating theater from the dithyrambs. He created a new style in which a single person performed the words of a character within the story, with characters distinguished through the use of masks. An interesting note about individuality there is that the chorus would consist of 12 to 50 men at a time. Thespis chose to break that unity in pursuit of the individuality when he created tragedy. An interesting potential source in why the followers of Speak as One are known as chorus.
Greek theater consisted of actors and the chorus. The actors would read the lines, interact, and perform the play. The chorus would comment on it, describe things, and serve as the background and narrators for the story within. Often, theater could include musicians, but even when we are unsure of if they possessed musicians, plays frequently featured rhythmic elements in the form of first trochaic tetrameter and iambic trimeter in the delivery of the spoken words.
Speak as One's mask is 2 masks in one with a massive hole for the kid's mouth. Charming. This calls back to historical Greek theater masks, both in the more obvious tragedy-comedy duality of masks, but also in the historical ones that we have seen depicted in murals and vases.
These were typically fairly simple masks, which had a large hole from the mouth that served as an amplifier. Everything about Greek theater was aimed at making sure that no matter the location on the stage, the individuals on it could be heard by everyone in the audience, and these could be some pretty fucking big audiences. The masks would also include eyes, and they were significantly oversized for the actor's face to ensure that they could be seen as well from the audience. They were created in a way as to make the character's identity immediately known without having to rely solely on costumes, and also to mask the actor's appearance and identity, because they were not considered deeply relevant when it came to the actual performance. The earliest forms of Greek tragedy only had one actor on stage at a time, a trend born of Thespis' initial innovation. Later on, the actor would begin actually interacting with the chorus, who would sing or dance but did not initially speak. By the point that Greek theater began evolving into the forms of theater that we recognize today, only 3 actors would perform on it at a time. This was not a musical. The focus was always fairly limited in scale.
And now we get into Speak as One and Christianity. Redacre has past mentions of religion in the form of things like Houdley's Leap. There was once a pastor who heard voices speaking to him and threw himself off of the cliffs due to their influences. Speak as One says that they could not save him. The full meaning of that is unclear.
The meaning of that is unclear, but clearly it did not involve having any of their many hordes of followers actually pull this motherfucker off the cliff. Sucks to suck. Speak as One is consistently associated with Christianity throughout the game, although it is, as previously mentioned, intentionally not a connection that was made explicit by the developers. Speak as One is associated out of the game, but is implied to have the same association in-world as well. Quote, to an extent, the sin system is like that. The kids are breaking the rules, and slowly that draws the ire of our boogeyman, who the locals also call the angel. Kind of a twisted notion of a moral guardian. The shape is what the kids nicknamed it, end quote. An interesting note here is that Speak as One has spoken about how the shape was created. They stated that the shape was created immediately after the idea left the group, and that it was created out of a moment of great wrath. The shape was a sacrifice, presumably willingly made, and because it was described as a thing of martyrdom. Pretty interesting.
He's an angry boy.
Pretty biblical, especially when we consider that Speak as One made an explicit point in this conversation to correct the names used. It is not the shape, it is the angel.
The importance of names is a recurring theme throughout the Blackout Club. Everything is angelic, working under Speak as One, who views themselves as the only true demon, and the rest is corrupted, cancerous bits that rebelled. They spoke of how the idea betrayed them, quote, it was as if your own hand turned against you, end quote.
Clearly, SAOs never accidentally bit the inside of their cheek before.
Another interesting parallel is if we compare SAO to the God in Christianity, then we can compare the idea to Lucifer, a connection that is already made explicit by the fact he's referred to as the devil. The idea is the firstborn son of Speakus One, who rebelled against his creator and then promptly went around and created lies. When Lucifer is linked to the snake in Eden, as he is in some denominations of Christianity, then he offered up humanity the apple that led to knowledge and free will, just as the idea gave the word and free will to humanity.
Chorus is the term for multiple angels, an angelic chorus. Angels are referred initially to as Malak, Hebrew word for messengers, and they speak God's will. The song, which Lucids follow, is interpreted by the voice, the head of chorus.
The shape is referred to as the angel and sports wings when enraged. Also tentacles, but that's not canon. But or is it? While most biblical accounts describe them as glowing men, angels are seen in various niche sections of the Bible as fairly eldritch, with descriptions like flaming wheels and hundreds of eyes. The shape is a man-shaped being who looks as if he's made of fire, especially when enraged.
Halos are common in most Indo-European depictions of religious figures. They were present in Greco-Roman and Buddhist sculptures, as well as appear frequently in Christian and Islamic art, and most frequently appear as a crown of light. In-game, halos are given by daemons to show PCs that they have marked or taken an interest in.
In Euro-American context, they're most frequently associated with Christianity, and it's of interest that Speakus One is the only daemon who for the longest time was assumed not to give halos at all.
Programming note. We've decided to post breaking news every other week in order to reduce our workload. Find those on our off weeks, as in weeks we don't publish episodes, on our Twitter at TheDreamingPC. We now have a website with links to all of our guides and resources on it. This includes the newbie guide, the Lorepedia, the player terms lexicon, and more. You can find that at tinyurl.com/thedreamingprophet. Cal, Archer's Volley, and Skigulium has made a lore master doc. This is updated every Monday or so with all of the latest lore, with the help of the Dreaming Prophet. Mostly Lavanya because they're amazing. You can find that at tinyurl.com/tbcloreguidev2. There's also an official archive on the Discord. This archives both God Talks and personal dreams. If you have transcripts or videos, please add them to the archive. There's also an option to allow your encounter to be used to support the wiki, which is heavily encouraged. Join the Discord to get involved at discord.gg/theblackoutclub. The Blackout Club is made by Question Games. Our transcript and assets are by Lavanya. Audio editing is by me, Astro. Our guest today was Burrick. Xaviul isn't that thing that hides under your bed.
I'm in the closet.